Welcome back to Mountain Connections. Recently, I spoke with Dr. Wilber Su all about atrial fibrillation. What do you need to know? When do you need to be concerned? If you feel like your heart is racing all the time through just simple activities, if you have quite a bit of fatigue, these all could be worrisome signs. So we dug into this topic. Let's take a look.
For millions of Americans, daily fatigue, racing heart, or shortness of breath climbing stairs may not be a sign of aging. It could be a sign of a larger and potentially deadly heart condition. Atrial fibrillation, also referred to as AFib, is one of the most common heart rhythm disorders, affecting nearly 60 million people worldwide. In fact, it is estimated that by 2030, 12.1 million people will have AFib in the United States alone. Here to talk about what causes atrial fibrillation, as well as what signs and symptoms to look for, is Cardiac Electrophysiologist Dr. Wilber Su. Dr. Su, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me exactly what is atrial fibrillation, or AFib, and why it affects so many people.
Atrial fibrillation, or AFib, is an abnormal heart rhythm that is caused by irritable triggers in the heart that just takes over your normal heart rhythm. So it causes the heart to race away out of control and can have these palpitations, shortness of breath, and can present even in heart failure and, unfortunately for some, even stroke.
What are the signs and symptoms of AFib, and how might they be mistaken for just signs of generally getting older?
The signs and symptoms can vary from patient to patient. Some feel very fatigued and palpitations are very symptomatic from the abnormal rhythm. But for some, it can be quite asymptomatic until they present with a stroke. So the awareness of some of these minor symptoms are very important. And yes, sometimes they can just think that they're just getting older and therefore they're more fatigued. They can't do what they used to do. And so when you don't feel right, it is very important to have yourself checked out and rule out potential reversible causes such as atrial fibrillation.
And how is AFib treated?
AFib can be treated several different ways. Traditionally, we use medication to thin out the blood so that it reduces the risk for stroke. We can use medication to suppress the irritable spots in the heart to try to suppress AFib from coming out. But because AFib is progressive, unfortunately, a lot of these medications just fail over time. There are ways we can try to eliminate AFib by getting on top of the triggers that starts AFib. So that's a process called ablation. So procedures such as what's called a cryoballoon ablation is now being widely adopted. It's being used over 1 million times worldwide to treat atrial fibrillation. And this is a way to freeze off the irritable spots in the heart that causes AFib to come out. And it's now considered a first-line treatment by FDA, even before the drug is used.
Why is it so important to avoid delaying treatment if experiencing of these signs or symptoms?
The AFib is progressive, so the longer you let the AFib go, the more that it can affect the surrounding normal tissue. So it can go from what we call the paroxysmal AFib that comes and goes to persistent AFib that just stays there, and to long-standing persistent AFib that just there for years. And different stages of AFib are quite different in terms of how we can eliminate that altogether. So paroxysmal AFib, as it just comes out, is very highly curable. And so whereas long-standing persistent AFib is quite problematic, and the cure rate can be much, much lower.
And where can we get more information?
So information on trusted websites such as stopaf.org or afibmanagement.com is a very good source.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wilber Su. I appreciate this important information about atrial fibrillation, or AFib, how it affects people, treatment, signs and symptoms, and much more. Thanks for your time today.
Great. Thank you for having me.